Awesome. All right, well, welcome to this conversation around balancing hormones. Just lighting some incense because that's what I do. Okay, over there. Put this here so you can see. All right, welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you so much for taking your time out to join me here. So I muted everybody as they were coming into the call, just because we don't need to manage all those background sounds that might be happening at this time of day, wherever you are. So if you have any questions along the way, I want you to just put them in the chat box, because my lovely assistant, Ruby Star, who also happens to be my daughter, is collecting any questions for me to address at the end. So there'll be a question time at the end. So also, if you may find that your question is answered as I continue to speak. So anything that arises, there are no silly questions. Feel free to write that down if you want to wait before putting in the chat box, whatever works for you. Now, I might just get my hair up. Alrighty, so for those that don't know, I am Nicole Phoenix Star. I live in Bali in Indonesia, and I was born in Australia, but I have been living predominantly in Indonesia since 2011. I did spend 6 months in Canada at one stage, a year in India, and during COVID, I did spend 18 months back in Australia. But since December last year, have been back here and feel like I am at home. So a little bit about me, a little bit about my story and how I found myself in this position to be able to share some profound wisdom and my take on the rite of passage, which is menopause. Because as the slide says, I love menopause, and I hope one day I can guide you so you can too. Bit of a hot topic, this, hormone, this change of life, the perimenopause, menopause journey, which is amazing. And I'm so excited that this conversation is becoming more and more normalized, I guess. And we are coming together to have these conversations, support each other, like used to happen once upon a time in more of a tribe society. So basically, recently I was thinking, what has been my story up until this point in regards to my journey into perimenopause, and on the very cusp of menopause. I am 50 years old. I turned 50 this May, and I took 13 nights out of my life and took myself on a really profound and beautiful rite of passage to step into this decade, deeply honoring this season in my life and really claiming the wisdom that does come with the journey of perimenopause and menopause. And it was such a humbling humbling time, and, you know, like everything, nothing quite like I expected, but was quite unimaginable actually. And I rested lots and did lots of things that my body was yearning for. That busy life really isn't a regular thing. So it really was a bit of a reset for me to consciously and intentionally step into my 50s. And it really it is a beautiful journey for me. I deeply respect all the cycles that us women go through, and that's how I've landed in love with menopause. So I'm just going to backtrack a little bit to my early 20s when I used to work in air traffic control. I've got quite an eclectic journey. I've got many strings in my bow. So I used to work in air traffic control, and I used to train air traffic control students. And during that time, I realized I wasn't the greatest cook, and I wasn't really nourishing my body in ways that perhaps I could. And so in between sessions of air traffic control training, I used to read cookbooks. And I devoured so many cookbooks, and then I started writing notes about the cookbooks and recipe development and all of this stuff. It was very spontaneous, wasn't really intentional to become a master of recipe development and learning how to cook. And then I'd spend about 4 to 6 hours every week playing with recipes and really fine-tuning my skills in the kitchen. And I am known as quite the chef these days, among other things. So that's where kind of that started. And after about 7 years, I finished air traffic control. I'd had 2 children by that time. And I went from full-time into contract work and just worked part-time and contracts in between the children. And realized that the world of air traffic control, the boys club, really wasn't my scene. And we ended up buying a restaurant down at the beach on the foreshore of Mooloolaba after a big move from Melbourne to the Sunshine Coast. And I found myself in a real kitchen. And developing recipes for that restaurant and working with head chefs and doing shifts in the kitchen and cooking and really loving that. Like, I used to love it so much. I did the floor as well, and I did run the business, and I built a really amazing business. But being in that kitchen was really my favorite, and that's when kind of food started talking to me, and it became very intuitive. And when I stepped out of the restaurant business, because it's really hard work and takes up so much of your time, and still having young children, I found myself at home, and I became quite the intuitive chef and dropped recipes, and food started talking to me, and I really started looking more into the nourishment and working out basically where I landed that, you know, food is medicine. Then I kind of pivoted again and stepped into the hair and beauty world, and bought a hair and beauty salon with my cousin, and again found that, you know, bricks and mortar businesses is hard work, especially by then I was a single parent. And having small children still, I ended up working from home. And what I found is I was working with a lot of menopausal women, because I predominantly worked with a IPL machine, which does hair removal, these ones, and skin rejuvenation. And a lot of these menopausal women became really vulnerable on the table and shared so much with me. And that's when I really started to get a live realization that menopause was this really big event that lasted a really long time. And, you know, they had complete changes in their skin, and they had a lot of hair spreading out of their face. And they shared, you know, so much about, again, their change in their libido. They talked to me about just not feeling themselves. And I really got an insight because they were so willing to share. It was such a, and at the time I thought, when I shifted out of that and found myself moving to Bali, that part of that was about holding space for women. And it really was, because then I started holding space for women and spiritual journeys, and found myself on the most unimaginable journey. And that is when I became a Hindu high priestess. Never, ever saw that one coming. But what that did lead me to was, in a practice, I was sent into a form of spiritual fasting. So it was all about being able to make the body light and clear so you can have a greater connection in meditation. And during that process, which started out as a spiritual quest, it really turned into a physical quest. And I learned so much about fasting and how that can dramatically change so much, particularly if you're in a health crisis and as your hormones are changing, because I was nearing 40 by then. And then I was able to take many of my students through a fasting and health processes and all of these things. So I could, like I said, in hindsight, I can see how all of these experiences have compounded me into where I am today. So what I do know is that when you get close to 40, you get this rush of hormones, which is kind of your body saying, is there any last chance we can have a baby? And what happened is my body responded with a big fat yes. Again, much to my surprise. I found myself pregnant. I got pregnant on my 40th birthday. I had been in a very serious and structured fasting process previous to that. My body was in its most peak state it had ever been in. I was so clean, I was so healthy, and I was the optimum container for a baby to grow. And so that's exactly what happened. It was a really difficult process for me because my two older children were entering their tweens at that stage. And this journey, it was really, really difficult and really huge. And it was, to bring a baby into the mix seemed outrageous. But, you know, here we are and all thriving, and it's worked out to be one of the most amazing rites of passage in itself, otherwise known as a geriatric pregnancy by the medical industry. And I ended up breastfeeding for almost 4 years. And so that brought me up to like nearly 45. So I had regular cycles until then. And what happened then is around 45, I realized that I started getting quite obvious perimenopause symptoms. I didn't really realize at the time because, you know, I went into a really big health crisis and that was confusing to me. So basically, at that time, I'd moved to India, and I had to do this, you know, general massive series of tests to be able to spend some time in an ashram. And during those series of tests, they realized that I had a prolapse valve in my heart, and that I had a very, very serious heart condition, again, much to my unawareness. And it was highly suggested that I go on heart medication, which are kind of like blockers. And I was like, you know, I'm a spiritual teacher and I'm a meditation teacher, and to, you know, block my connection just seems impossible to me, like to be able to like shut me down. It just freaked me out. And then they said, you know, well, you'll probably end up having to get a stent in your heart because the valve is really in a, you know, quite compromised position. So what I did is I decided to try and heal myself and to use food as medicine. So I had the luxury at that time to spend about 4 hours a day using all my skills and tools and everything that I knew to work, energy work on my body, using meditation and you know, different forms of energy work. And I ate for my heart, and I ate for my optimum health. And I did all sorts of woo-woo things. And I, after 6 months, had a group of cardiologists in India say to me, "You're a miracle. We have no idea how you did this, but you're absolutely fine. Like, you know, the valve is in no need for surgery anymore. You know, it's something you need to get checked every 5 years, which I have, and everything's fine. And can you just tell us everything you did?" And I told them, and they were just captivated. And it was really just the beginning of me to learning to trust my body, to trusting my intuition, and just educating myself as much as I could on all the things, and eating in a way that was so intentional, eating in a way that, you know, I had a practice where I would absorb all these nutrients for the highest good, and it was a miracle. So that was one of the, you know, huge beginning parts of that. But during that, I was getting a lot of kind of symptoms, or my teeth started moving, and that's something that happens. And, you know, your gums and teeth kind of go a bit funky. And I just had lots and lots of, and my period, like my cycle just went crazy. And I just thought it was, you know, the fact I was in a health crisis, and there was probably a piece in it, but in actual fact, it was the beginning of like textbook established in perimenopause. I remember, because I have a period app, which is something that's really helpful to keep you educated in your own cycle, so you become intimate with how your body works. And, you know, I looked at my phone and it said I was 88 days late. I hadn't had a cycle for 88 days. And I was like, wow, this is crazy. And then about, then I had periods for a while, and they're just all over the place, you know, every 6 weeks, every 2 weeks, like just all over the place, textbook perimenopause. And then I had my 21-day cycle, which I bled rivers for 21 days. I would bleed out my menstrual cup within a couple of hours, and I had period pants. You know, I'd have to change 2 times during the night, and this went on for 21 days. It was absolutely crazy. It was really, really intense. And that's when I started with the hormone headaches. And that's when I started with this weight gain that just didn't make any sense. I hadn't changed the way that I was eating, except I was just getting more and more thick across the belly. My face was getting more round. And I started feeling like the rise in the temperature. My sleep was getting really broken. And my nipples were starting to get really, really sore. It was very, very, very perplexing at the time. And I did notice a decrease in, you know, the activity in my womb, and a sense of, at the time, I was celibate, so I wasn't sexually active. So, you know, my libido at that time was, you know, a little bit different to most people. But I did notice that, you know, those sensations that we feel were all very, very diminished, absolutely. And so I did go and see a naturopath who did some blood work and found that my blood was, she showed me a photo and my blood looked all really tired and kind of sleepy, and gave me some different, you know, meds and that to fulfill vitality into my bloods. Also just gave me, you know, a few tips around, you know, the journey ahead that menopause may come. And so that's when I started studying hormones, and I joined 2 different programs at that time, and started consuming all of this information and just starting to make like little tweaks and stuff. It was very difficult because, excuse me, most of the content was demonizing menopause, how terrible it is, what a hard thing it is for women. And, you know, this terrible belly fat we have and we just want to lose weight. It was very much geared around weight loss and getting rid of your menopause and perimenopause belly. It wasn't saying very nice things about menopause. And it really had this view that it's not something we want to embrace. It's something that we want to, you know, kind of not have to deal with. And me, it didn't really sit very well with me, because I believed menopause to be a rite of passage. I believed going from, you know, a bleeding womb that was able to produce children, you know, in the mother cycle of our life, whether we're having children or not, transitioning into, you know, the wise woman and the crone, and the next season in our life was something to be honored just as much as when we, you know, go into menstruation, because that is something that I was really, really passionate about. And some of this information was created by men who had never been through menopause, and young women that, you know, were bringing through kind of information. And so there was lots of different information within that. And again, like, I was just finding that I was getting some relief, but it was just like up and down, up and down, up and down. It just kept, I felt okay, and then I didn't feel okay, and then I'd be, you know, I'd have the energy to do some exercise, and then I'd be in complete layers of exhaustion, and it just felt like it was this roller coaster. It was just confusion, you know, and again, my periods were just all over the shop. And I just felt like there was no one I could go to that had the answers for me. You know, I then, you know, reached out to a health coach who was again focusing on the weight loss, and she kind of gave me different bits of information. And what I found is I found that there was this consistency in some of their message, and there was a lot of difference in the rest of it. And I then ended up in another health crisis. I got dengue fever. I had to come to Bali to sell my house. And while my parting gift from Bali back to Australia was dengue, which is a mosquito virus. And I got to the point where it never occurred for me to be dengue. It would be dengue. And I went to 2 different doctors, and they just thought, although I didn't have COVID, I had some bad flu or something. They really just didn't know. And then eventually I was able to see my regular doctor, who had been away at the time, and he trained and spent a lot of time in dengue tents in Sri Lanka. And he said, "You've got dengue and you need to go to hospital right now, otherwise you're going to die." By then, all the whites in my eyes were yellow, and I was just slowly dying. Basically, what happens is your blood starts boiling and you start burning and dying from the inside. And so I ended up going to hospital. They put me in the infectious diseases award because they didn't know what to do because they'd never had a case before, and they were Googling what to do. They put me on a drip and then came running in and ripped it out and said, sorry, wrong medicine. And I was just deteriorating by the minute. I spent a week in hospital and was able to get stable, and then came home and had to recover from that. It was horrific. And again, all my menopause symptoms were all over the shop because I was so sick. And then I, about week 3 from getting home, I started feeling okay. And then I got COVID. And then we call that Deng Rona. And then all my hair fell out. Basically 2/3 of my hair fell out. And again, my teeth started moving and I was crazy periods, all of these things. And I realized that I really needed to find a way to heal myself from this, because I was in bed all the time, running a house, children, all of those things. And I started, going back into all my notes and everything, finding ways to build myself up, and just realizing that I was having so many of these symptoms. And, it felt like they could have been associated with the health crisis, but in actual fact, they were primarily perimenopause symptoms. I decided then that I was going to really commit to that. And in that process, Bali opened up and I was able to return. And I got, really quite good by then. And then the hot flushes started really intensely. The headaches, the exhaustion, all the textbook symptoms were full blown. And I knew that, I was outside of the health crisis and I was really in the depths of perimenopause. I had watched my mother suffer greatly. And when I told her that I was in perimenopause, she said, oh, you're in that god awful thing. It lasts for years and it is horrible. And I was like, it's very interesting that we don't always get to be guided and given this information by, our grandmothers or mothers or anyone. And having a huge container of women that I held space for, I knew that the answer was, coming together and having these conversations. But what I really needed to do was get on top of this. So I made a decision that I needed to either go on HRT, because I'd been running around for 3 months, so busy, and I was completely depleted. I was functioning on pure adrenals, and which was completely shot, and I needed to do something. And I sat with that because I was willing to take any option. When you get so desperate, any option at all, I was up for. And I did a lot of research into that. My body just kept saying no. We've done so many incredible things. You're a master healer. This isn't a health crisis. This is life. This is normal. This is what every woman goes through in their own version. And so, kind of like telling your body that it's going through something different by using different hormones isn't something that felt aligned for me. Although, I was absolutely willing to go there if it was going to give me, the shift. And I have, zero judgment for anyone who chooses that route. Like, whatever one needs to do in those moments, I absolutely, say you do whatever you need to do, because everyone is so unique and so different. So what I did is I pulled out all my notes again and I really found out those similar pieces, and I educated myself in a way that I kind of glossed over so many parts of it and really got into the depths. So it just landed on me like I was just so ready to understand what hormonally was happening to me, because this is a journey of hormones. Like, it's 100%, you know, all triggered by the hormone, because we go from hormone functioning to be able to have a child to slowly diminishing that. So, you know, we no longer are able to have children because we have completed that season in our life. And so I dove in and I created this, all the pieces that were the same. I created a very specific formula, and I got completely schooled on exactly what was happening to my body. And then I started myself. I was the perfect candidate to test this on. And I was completely desperate. And I just felt, I have to do this for myself. I just have to do everything I can, like life or death, you know, yeah, heart surgery or not. Like, that's how I felt. Like, I just went all in. And what happened very quickly, you know, within the first week, everything started changing. And within 21 days, I had no symptoms, like none. I was so flabbergasted. I was so shocked. And I just thought they would come back, and they haven't. You know, I was having up to 20 hot flushes, which I was calling power surges by then, a day, you know, waking multiple times at night, just having horrific sleep, preparing myself to do things, and then knowing I'd have to spend time in bed in deep exhaustion. I was gaining more and more weight, and I just started losing weight, you know, like very quickly as well. And that was not my intention, to lose the weight. My intention was to balance my hormones so that I could get in a position where my body knew what was going on. My body felt safe, you know, that I was able to process stress, that my body wasn't in this like freaked out fight or flight mode every minute of the day. And then I started sharing it with others, and they have been getting incredible results. And so that's when I realized that, you know, I'm onto something, because every single person I've shared this with so far have had extraordinary results. So here we are. So basically, I'm going to start and educate you a little bit on the journey of our hormones. So basically, we have 3 primary hormones, and they are estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. I'll talk about testosterone in a minute. But basically, you'll see here in these fertility years, you know, which normally starts, we develop into full hormonal ripeness around the age of 21. So this point here is around the age of 21, and this here is around the age of 40. So this is that journey that we have when we are ripe to be able to have children. And you'll see here that we are like got lots and lots and lots of progesterone, and we have even more of estrogen, okay? And then as we come through these 40s, and everyone else is different, but this is just a graph to show you, is you know, very quickly, this progesterone starts going down to almost nothing. And the estrogen just starts going up and down. And that's when you get into those stages of like delusion, where you're like, oh my God, this is outrageous. And you're like, oh, I'm okay now. Oh no, they're becoming, you know, and you just feel like you're on this roller coaster, and it's just like far out. And then basically we get to this point where we no longer are bleeding. We have spent 1 year since our last menstruation. And after that 1 year is when we are officially in menopause. And then it just slowly decreases until around 60. And that is when we go into postmenopause. And that is like a general average. So this journey from here to here is 20 years. basically we experience things for around 10 years and can be in it for up to 5 years. So this is a big time in our lives. You know, this is such a huge time. And this is why, you know, kind of having teenagers in the middle of this can be really, really, really challenging, because we don't have the capacity to be able to navigate difficult times like we used to. And I'll explain in the next one. So basically, estrogen is like the lead actress. It's the most prominent one we have. And it's where basically the estrogen provides our confidence, our resilience, the adventurous nature, you know, that part of us that's willing to do everything. The capacity to have the endurance that you may find that is no longer around, fat distribution, it looks after our cortisol levels, thyroid impact, and it creates a flexible metabolism, because what we do find is once these estrogen levels go down, the metabolism is very, very, very different. And we call the progesterone like the supporting actress. And she is the one that has that caring nature. You know, the progesterone is the one that stays up in the middle of the night with the children, with the babies and all of that. Nurturing, she's very accommodating. She can be very, very creative. There's lots of progesterone that brings creativeness in us. It's a part that brings the preparation for babies, like the physical preparation. Having healthy progesterone helps with the pregnancy viability, okay? And progesterone is depleted by stress. And that's why in today's world, you know, kind of getting pregnant doesn't seem to be as easy as it used to, because the progesterone is such an important part of pregnancy viability that all the stress we have these days is depleted by, you know, the progesterone is depleted by stress. You know, and it is the root of most of the hormone symptoms. So when the progesterone starts going up and down, that's when we are experiencing those symptoms. All right, now let's bring in our friend testosterone. And this is where the libido is, okay? This is where we have our vaginal changes. This testosterone kind of works with mood balance. It's to do with our muscle strength and mass. We kind of find when we're in these symptoms, we aren't as strong, you know, and we don't have the capacity to be able to build muscle like we used to. It's where those facial hairs come from. And it's our bone strength. So you'll see in these graphs I've provided where this estrogen is doing all of these things, our progesterone is going down very quickly. The testosterone just goes down slowly, and it ends up taking over the lead role. And again, it's why we see some women and they become more up and down and lose that kind of hourglass their waist. It's why, you know, some women kind of get more square-faced and kind of have sort of more of a masculine essence about them, especially when, you know, things are quite dramatic. The other thing is our melatonin drops quite a lot, and that really doesn't help with the quality of our sleep. So when I got really well schooled on this, I could see the root cause of so many things. I really realized that there were so many parameters that was happening. And what happens is because our estrogen goes down and our progesterone goes down, what we eat and how that is processed and how we deal with stress and how we deal with processing stress is completely affected because of the loss of these vital hormones that are really strong. So our purpose here is not to return to this pre-state, but to get the body into a balanced state where we can grow and thrive as our body changes. And it's completely achievable. I am living proof. Now, so let's talk about these symptoms. As I'm sure some of you may have experienced, and I certainly have, irregular and often extreme periods. Those hormone headaches, we just think we've got a headache because of life, but they are so driven by hormones. Those hot flushes, power surges, as I call them, which are huge messengers. For me, whenever I was highly stressed, overwhelmed, had too much on my plate, they would come up and they just try and regulate your hormones. That's what they're trying to do. And also night sweats. Insomnia, my sleep was crazy. And about 7 or 8 weeks into being committed to this formula, I slept through the night for the first time in 11 years. And that just blew my brain. Sleeping through the night, like what? And I've been sleeping through the night ever since. I've had a couple of nights, and that's just kind of mostly been random things like, an earthquake or someone making a noise in the room next to me. But sleeping through the night just changes everything. Like it's unbelievable for someone who has broken sleep so much. The exhaustion, your cortisol's just shot, your adrenals are shot, irritability. This is a huge piece. And this is the progesterone. We used to have that caring nature, that ability to accommodate people in so many things. And we find we're just really irritable, and things that used to really irk us, that never used to irk us, really do now. And it's like, for me, someone that's worked with mindfulness for years and years and years and meditation, and finding myself irritable about little things, I was so confused. I got to a point where I was just like, am I bypassing something right now? Because my body is screaming that there's a problem. My body is like, I was feeling these sense of anxiety, there was this anxiety inside me, and my brain's like, it's really not a big problem. And I'm like, well, why do I feel like I need to go to war? And it's just like, because you don't have the progesterone that you used to have. And I'm like, wow, amazing. Again, that's all shifted. Aches and pains, my body was in aches and pains all the time. I had these watering eyes, like that was another thing for me. I got frozen shoulder. Many women get frozen shoulder. I just thought it was like from lying in bed for so long when I had, health crisis. Brain fog, that's fun. My daughter used to call me butterfly brain. And I think I used to believe her, but I just have brain fog. Hair loss, facial hair growth, the weight gain. And we start these cravings. And a really regular thing is craving lots and lots of sugar, caffeine, and even alcohol. Sore nipples and breasts, vaginal changes, libido changes, and so many more. Thing is, we no longer have to micromanage every symptom, trying to deal with one symptom with one thing and another thing and another thing. Because if you are able to balance your hormones, all of these things just sort themselves out. It is quite, I don't know, like it's like anything. If you focus on optimum health, pure vitality, rather than just putting out small fires, they generally do work themselves out. So here is the formula. Here is the magic formula. So basically there is 2 formulas that we follow. And that is those that are still bleeding. So that's like anyone that, you know, may not be having perimenopause symptoms, because some people don't, but there's some people that have painful periods, you know, and they put it down to, you know, just their lot. And it doesn't need to be that way. Like, I've been able to give this as well to younger women who have painful periods and aren't in their perimenopause era, and they've been able to lessen their period pain, the pain of their period and their flow and all sorts of things. The other side is menopause. So that is 1 year after you finish bleeding. So basically, we wake up, and the first thing we do is we take water. And so we're able to flush out all the toxins that have moved around in the body. The first thing you should put in your body is water, not coffee, not juice, not anything other than that, just water, and then allow yourself to go to the bathroom so that you can just flush out the body from whatever it's been doing in the night. The other thing is if you take any supplements, and I do take some, and I highly recommend that if you're having any particular symptoms, that these may help you. So the first thing I take is ashwagandha, and it's something that I've started taking for when I had my health crisis, because ashwagandha is a magic little thing where it does give you a boost of energy, but what it does is it works uniquely and personally with you, and will help flush out anything that your body's trying to expel. It's something that I've used in so many different health consultations for so many different people, and ashwagandha is like one of those things that kind of works so well for so many people. It's also really good for libido. It's good for men as well. And it's just an all-round kind of health thing. The other thing is magnesium. Magnesium is a girl's best friend, irrespective of whether you're having symptoms or not. Magnesium will give your body a zing. But it just helps with, you know, absorption of nutrients. It helps with so many things. So I used to take a magnesium sleep until dear Nikki got me on to probably my most favorite thing ever is the Mega Magnesium Sleep Powder. And it's a magnesium sleep powder that I take 1 scoop of half an hour before I'm ready to go to sleep every night. And it helps you stay asleep. Like, you know how sometimes you can fall asleep exhausted and then you wake up and you're just like, you know, wired and all of these things. The magnesium in it helps you stay calm, and it really helps you stay asleep if you are having broken sleep. And my body just loves it. There's lots of different brands. I have 3 going because I am, you know, a detective and I like to try everything. I'm not sure if this one's still in. Oh, I can't even do that. Anyway, all of this information I'll be sending to you. Now, the other thing that I was doing some research, and I went and saw this woman, and I was asking her about HCH injections, which is testosterone, which can be really helpful for some women during perimenopause. And she was like, no, no, what I recommend is you take evening primrose oil with fish oil. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm a vegetarian and fish oil. And I'm like, she's like, I promise you, it'll help with your hot flushes. Like, it's the best thing ever. Again, I was at that desperate point, and like taking a capsule with a little bit of fish oil, I was willing to sacrifice my vegetarianism, which, you know, I've been a vegetarian on and off most of my life, and became a vegetarian full-time when I was probably about 39. But, you know, I do eat eggs, and so I'm not a vegan and I do take fish oil with my Primrose. And I used to take 2 in the morning and 2 at night, but I only take 2 now because I'm on maintenance. And again, like, it's just part of the nutrition piece, basically. And the other thing I did used to use for a while when I was in health crisis was this progesterone cream. It's a natural, I can't even see that. It's a natural one. It's a yam based, and it used to make me feel good. It used to bring the progesterone back. It used to make me feel soft again after feeling so hard and harsh. But I haven't used that for a long time because I was really didn't wanting any kind of anything to manipulate where exactly my hormones were, so I could learn to work with them. Okay, moving on. So basically, I had to break my brain a little bit around this because, you know, during my fasting journey and, you know, being a vegetarian all through, you know, my 30s and half my 20s, and everyone used to say to you, you know, where's your protein? And I was like, we don't need protein. And we don't, because estrogen and progesterone provide it for us. It doesn't provide it. What it does is it kind of does all the things. Estrogen and progesterone does all the things that protein does when you no longer have the estrogen and progesterone stores. Bringing protein into your diet, whether that vegan protein, vegetarian protein, or animal protein, is a must, because it will fill the gaps where the estrogen and the progesterone have fallen away. And this is the thing that instantly changed my severity of my symptoms, was starting to eat protein in every meal and getting really, really creative with that. Being a vegetarian, I had to hack getting my protein numbers in. So I started eating eggs when I was back in Australia, just because I'd stopped eating eggs in Bali because I'd had a few not great eggs. And I started eating eggs again in Australia, but then I had to introduce them. I now have eggs every day, and I love it because it's such an amazing form of protein. But then, you know, adding in additional ways, and I created this protein powder. I call it golden dust because it's predominantly made from golden flax seeds. Not a protein powder as such. It's just this magic dust, and it's got lots and lots of protein in. I sprinkle it on everything just to be able to bring those protein numbers up, you know, and just working out that Greek yogurt has so much protein in it. And so introducing some, like a tablespoon of Greek yogurt into my diet and being okay with that. And just like just high protein vegetables and having lots of those on my plate, and really finding ways to get really savvy with my protein, because, you know, this formula is very, very easy if you eat animal protein, and it's, you know, easier if you eat eggs and you're vegetarian. But if you are vegan, then we have to get a little bit more savvy. And I've done lots and lots and lots of research to be able to do that. So I've been able to create full meal plans and full recipes to make sure there's enough protein in every meal for the 3 categories of what people are. Again, so basically for breakfast, if you are in that first group, we need protein, we need fat, and we need vegetables. And basically fat, I use avocado because it's such a good fat. And fat is such a helpful thing for a menopausal, perimenopausal, hormone imbalanced woman. It's like growing up in the 80s. You have to break your brain because you think fat's fat and it's not. You know, we grew up in the low fat diet kind of era, and breaking up my brain around fat really took some time. So avocado is predominantly the fat that I have at breakfast, and I always have a cooked breakfast. The alternate you can have is a protein powder smoothie, and using one banana and berries. Basically, the sweetener that I would use is a date. Half nut milk and half water, and using a protein powder. I used to make protein powders when I was in Australia for menopause and for adrenal balancing and all of this stuff, but I stopped that when I left. But I do have the recipes. And basically, you can either have a protein shake or you can cook yourself a breakfast. And what happens is I always used to miss breakfast and find myself starving. I would binge eat and all of this stuff would happen. So I had to befriend breakfast. And befriending breakfast has been one of the most amazing things I've ever done. Lunch, protein again, salad full of green food, or you can have cooked veg and protein, or soup and protein, but no starch, no pumpkin soup, no starch in any of the lunch. For a snack, fruit, nut butter, a chia pudding, or a protein smoothie, and dinner, protein, veg or salad with starch. And with starch is basically sweet potato, pumpkin, half serve of potatoes, and these starchy vegetables help with sleep. We don't have them at lunch because that's when we get, you know, different spikes that will give us that afternoon tiredness. And forming this formula has changed everything for me. I follow it to the T, and I have lost accidentally, without intentional, you know, nearly 10 kilos since I started this, which is nearly 20 pounds. So it's been quite extraordinary. The other side is for women who are post-menopause, we just have 30 grams of starch in the morning, whereas you have no starch unless you are bleeding on the other side. That's the only difference. And everything else is the same. And I will be sharing all this for you, so don't freak out that you need to kind of work all this out. And again, you know, protein for vegetarians, you know, tofu, tempeh, there's so many different options these days. It's really quite easy to be able to have that during your day. So next, I'm going to talk about exercise, sleep, and stress management. Because most women who lose estrogen and progesterone find that the workout that they used to do or the exercise they used to do doesn't work anymore. It just doesn't work. Like, I used to be in these programs where all these women were doing, going to the gym 4 or 5 times a week and doing CrossFit and putting on weight. And it used to be their maintenance, and they kept putting on weight and they couldn't work out why. So they started eating less and their body went into complete crisis mode, holding on weight. And so consistently walking, and not power walking, but just walking, gentle weights for strength, yoga and Pilates, of course. And there's metabolic specific short HIIT sessions, which just help with strength and keeping your bone density and those types of things strong. Now, sleep is an extreme factor. An interesting fact is that if you're getting less than 7.5 hours sleep, your body will hold onto energy. And that energy is what you would normally burn in calories just being awake. So if you get less than 7.5 hours sleep and your friend gets 8 to 8.5 hours sleep, she will burn 30 more calories a day for just being awake and having a good sleep. Blew my mind. And again, tested, measured works. It's true. Stress management. We need to find new skills because we don't have progesterone or estrogen to be able to buffer. Having that awareness is the first step, that how we manage stress really is a new way of being than how we used to when we had these high levels, and now we don't. There's different ways, you know, meditation is always great, but self-regulating, really recognizing when you're in that place, being able to be radically, you know, radical responsibility is always a huge thing. You know, you're stretched, you know that you're in a symptom zone and that you're going to probably act in a way of managing stress that you never used to be. So it really is becoming, again, more intimate with your body and being able to listen. Another option is HRT, as I said, and it is a solution for some. It does come with lots of side effects for some people, just like, you know, the pill does and things like that. So generally they find that anyone that had side effects with a pill, it can happen, or anyone who's had ovarian cancer or any kind of issues in the womb, that you can't go on it because it can cause greater risk of breast and ovarian and cervical cancer. So that's just something to think about that I wanted to mention. So the other thing that we need to consider with our formula is the 6-second gratification issue of when we put something in our mouth, by the time it goes into our throat and our body, is on average 6 seconds. So we spend all this time cooking and eating to taste and eat food, and then it's gone. 6 seconds, we invest all that time shopping, cooking, presenting, sitting, eating, and in 6 seconds, each bite is gone. And so did it taste good? Was it yummy? Are we actually investing in what happens after that? How our body receives it, how it impacts our body, right? And so I used to be the 6-second gratification, you know, being a foodie, being a chef, you know, making amazing food all the time, loaded with unnecessary calories, wanting to, you know, have the most amazing tasting experience. I realized that I wasn't really recognizing, outside of health crises, how important that was to my body. So the purpose of this really is to get these hormones balanced so that that's our primary focus and not weight loss. Because if we're focusing on weight loss and we aren't getting results, then we're just putting pressure on our hormones. And like I said, quite often weight loss is a default, but we can also work with it additionally and intentionally. So how we do that is getting in a caloric window. And we take in 1,500 to 2,500 calories for maintenance and between 1,300 and 1,800 calories for weight management. And the weight management is when we're working out if we want to lose weight and how much we want to lose weight. We can actually zero in using all of these formulas that I have. I used to work with bodybuilders and I learned how they used to eat the same thing every day and have a certain amount of calories to get a certain amount of results. And I was like, that's just crazy. And then I actually schooled myself on it and realized that it's a thing. And then one of the programs I was in was with a health coach, explained it to me on such a level that I realized that when people eat the same thing every day, they do so intentionally and their body is less stressed because it knows what needs to digest. But also we can hack so much of the outcome by just being aware and recognizing. So we can use scales for research and data gathering, not as a measurement of a success. And that's what I do. I'm in the process of, I weigh myself every day. The standing on the scale stigma has completely gone. I use it to collect data to find out when I'm testing different foods, or I'm testing, different exercise, or I'm testing sleep, stress, all of these things. And, like I said, weight loss was never my focus. What my focus was dealing with the symptoms. So when we balance our hormones, our life feels more balanced. Our bodies adore a balanced diet. Really does. And this is when I realized that the old time of meat and 3 veg, as boring as that sounded, was actually a balanced diet, and tend to perhaps not give as many women in the world the numbers that we're seeing now that are having huge amounts of symptoms. So again, breaking the brain around such things. When we aren't struggling or in those, complete layers of exhaustion and broken cortisol and adrenal fatigue, our capacity for life is so much greater. And food really is the most magical medicine ever. And supporting each other and creating a connection is vital. Like, I find being able to work in groups, in no matter what we're doing, supporting each other, encouraging each other, inspiring each other. Someone will ask that question that you're too scared to ask. Someone will be going through exactly what you're going through, In the programs that I've worked with, in the study I've done, there was lots of group stuff. There was just no access to the person that was running it. There were just these big groups and these big programs, and to be able to get access to the main person was all but difficult. There was many support people and things like that. And but what I did see is women helping each other and creating real connection in a space where we're all going through the same thing. And it was just a really powerful part of my education. What I do know is that perimenopause and menopause is a rite of passage. It's something to be embraced. It's something that everyone goes through, no matter how difficult your symptoms may be or how much you experience it. Like, it really is such a beautiful time. And for me, I am so in love with my menopause journey. It really takes my breath away sometimes. I feel so blessed to be in these wise years of my life, to be stepping into, my 50s and feeling like there's just no nonsense, there's no silliness, and just feeling so grounded in who I am and feeling just empowered in who I am. Because it was really rough there for a couple of years. Like, I put on a brave face and all of those things, but deep down inside, I was just like, I don't even know who I am anymore. Who am I? Because you lose yourself. Alrighty, so